Whether you're thinking about upgrading your graphics card or you're about to buy a graphics card and you are considering AMD, watch the end of this video because I'm going to be going over the positives and negatives to if AMD is worth it for you. But before we start, make sure to subscribe because I'm trying to reach 1,000 subscribers. Now let's get on with the video. So first off, I really want to mention that GPUs are up to you. Like, it's your money. You get to choose what is right for you. But specific brands, there are 3 GPU brands, and each one has its caveats, and each one can be suited for individual people, depending on what you use your computer for. If you do many things on your computer, like you game, you stream, you use Blender, all those sorts of things, it's gonna be a lot harder for you to pick. But if you were just looking at maybe gaming, and maybe a little bit of, streaming here and there, then AMD is definitely a good option for you. Let's go over the pros of AMD. I recently did just switch from NVIDIA to AMD, so I am totally going off of my own thoughts and opinions and pros and cons. A first pro is that a lot of the AMD graphics card have way more VRAM than any other brand. So Intel's pretty good, but they're only really on the low end. NVIDIA, the cheapest 16 gigabyte graphics card is the 4060 Ti 16 gigabyte version, and that's $450. You can get a lot of AMD graphics cards with more VRAM for way less money. This is why I would recommend AMD, and there's a lot of other reasons too. Another reason is their incredible rasterization performance, and also native is very possible in a lot of games. I have tried it in many games, especially AMD sponsor games are really good for native and higher resolutions. For example, NVIDIA, their rasterization, if you don't use any of their AI stuff, it's not that great. Like for example, if you use a similar class card, AMD versus NVIDIA, and they just do rasterization, AMD is gonna come out on top 90% of the time, I feel like, except for in the high end. But it's just crazy. The value you get for the price to performance is just really good. And speaking of price to performance, the value is amazing. It's unbeaten. Intel might be AMD soon with upcoming releases, but it's unlikely, especially since AMD has been in the game for a lot longer than Intel. Intel just came out less than 4 years ago, so it's not gonna be that crazy, but AMD is just insane price performance with the rasterization. Granted, NVIDIA does have some more features, but that rasterization performance is amazing. Like, especially if you have like an HT PC, AMD is such a good option for you. AMD Adrenalin, the software that AMD has, is amazing. It's way better than NVIDIA. And supposedly there's a new one for NVIDIA, there's a new GeForce, but someone told me it's not even that much greater and AMD is still better. But I mean, AMD has so many features. It tracks all your game data, it shows statistics on specific games, it has recording and streaming. You can tune each individual game, like turning on like super resolution, anti-lag, stuff like that, image sharpening. And then if you go over to the performance tab, you can do so many things. You can see all your statistics, you can change them for the overlay, for example. And then if you go to the tuning tab, there's so many things you can do. You can undervolt, you can overclock, you can change all the frequencies individually, advanced or basic. You can change your fan speeds, you can change the power limit and everything like that. And then you have all the smart technologies that they use. And also, of course, it's where you download your drivers and check for updates and stuff. And it's really super easy. It's just as easy as GeForce is, honestly. So AMD Adrenalin is a really good, I was really looking forward to it when I had purchased my AMD graphics card, and it really exceeds my expectations. It's really great. Now granted, there is some bugs. Once in a while, I can't open it, so I have to manually close it on Task Manager, and then it works, but that's really the only hiccup I've had with it. And then recording and streaming on AMD is not bad, especially since newer GPUs have AV1 support. I have a 7000 series, so it has AV1 support, and AV1 is very good and crisp. Of course, I don't think Twitch has AV1 support yet. YouTube does, and it's good. Recording, if it's a little sensitive for me, I was using AV1 and I put the bitrate just a little too high, but then I turned it down a little bit and it was perfect Before it was like stuttering and stuff. There's also AMD sponsored games like Starfield, which run much better than NVIDIA or Intel because of their increased focus on AMD optimization. NVIDIA also has sponsored games, but less than AMD for modern titles. So like Starfield is an AMD sponsored game. It runs not significantly better, but it runs better. So it's really great to be able to have a sponsored game that is optimized for your GPU. It's all AMD GPUs, by the way. It's not even just the new ones. Your GPU will have good performance no matter what GPU you have. If it's AMD, it's gonna run good on those AMD sponsored games. There's also Smart Access Memory, which is, it's SAM for short, which gives increased performance if using both an AMD CPU and a GPU. But if you have an AMD CPU and GPU, which I don't, but you can enable SAM, and it'll enable your GPU and CPU to run like in sync basically. They also have it on the laptops, and then you get increased performance because their technologies are made for each other, so they can work together in tandem. There's also hardware-based FSR, frame generation, which is amazing. It works really good. Now you can't, unless you have the AMD overlay on, it doesn't show it. Like the Steam FPS that I use, it doesn't show that you have the double FPS basically. So you have to use the AMD overlay to see that. But you can definitely tell after you've had it on, that's smooth, and that's pretty great. It's just amazing that it's hardware based and that you can just enable it through the software. And that doesn't make it so some games can't have it. Literally any game can have it. Along with this, literally any GPU, it's open source, so any GPU can use it. I'm talking 10 series can use it, or even 900 series, which is great. And there's been a lot of talk about that in the past year or so. Now let's go over the cons. These are my cons that I've put together from my experience and from just something that you might make you look away from AMD. So with AMD, some cons are that their shader rendering, they don't do what NVIDIA does. NVIDIA, when you launch a game and they need to render shaders, it does it while it's loading. But AMD doesn't do that. AMD does it while it's playing the game. Some games, for example, like Finals, they do it like NVIDIA. They force you into rendering those shaders before you get into the game, before you click play, which is what it should be. But AMD unfortunately doesn't do that by itself. So unless a game specifically does it, has it coded in, then it's gonna be a little laggy until it loads all those shaders in, which is unfortunate. Like God of War, I never realized when I made one of my last videos, it said it in the bottom right that it was compiling the shaders and it had a percentage, and then as soon as it got to 100% and went away, you could tell it was smoother and loaded. But that is one downside. I never noticed that on NVIDIA on my old graphics card, and it's pretty obvious when it's still loading them in. And then when you just have a huge spike in performance and like lows. Another thing that I personally have found is editing and rendering. So I use Wondershare Filmora, which is a great software. I've been using it for years. And I just don't know if it uses CUDA or anything, but when I'm rendering, it takes a bit to start rendering, and I don't know why, because I think it's CUDA. I honestly think it is. But on my old GPU, it didn't do that. It would just immediately start rendering. But on Filmora, you have to render it for the preview to not be laggy for what you're watching on the preview, which is the video. So once you make a change visually, it has to render it to do that, and it just takes a while and slows down my workflow a little bit. It's not the end of the world, but it would be great if it wasn't like that. It could also be a Filmora optimization, but I'm sure on other things like Adobe, those really need CUDA, honestly. I'm pretty sure. I've heard from other more advanced editors. So like if you need CUDA and if you edit a lot and you don't want to slow down your workflow, maybe AMD isn't for you. Another thing is that recording and streaming is not nearly as competitive or good as NVIDIA with their built-in NVENC encoder. So same thing, they have CUDA, they have NVENC, AMD does not. AMD doesn't really have their own thing. They have the chips obviously, but doesn't have as fancy of stuff as NVIDIA does. NVENC is really good, especially for streamers, because It just eliminates the need. Like, there's advanced streamers that have 2 PCs, which is understandable. They want to have the smoothest stream possible. It's their job. For more average people that don't obviously need 2 computers for streaming because they're not that serious, they can just use NVENC, and it fully offloads the rendering or the encoding onto the NVENC chip, and the NVENC chip renders it, and then the GPU die, the actual GPU, does all the rendering of the game and stuff separately, which is a really good thing. Now, I haven't noticed any performance real difference just because of how different my new GPU is from my old one. Yeah, I'm sure you could probably notice it, especially if you're streaming like I'm not really a streamer, so I don't really know. Recording and streaming also isn't the best in Adrenaline. However, it could be improved upon easily since it's software. They could easily improve that over time. I'm sure they have been in their software. It's just easy updates. I mean, obviously not easy on their end, but it would just be an update to Adrenaline and it would be great. And I mean, I've never used it, but my friend that has AMD uses it, and he's so confused about how to use it, and it's not that smooth and easy to use, and so he ends up using other things. Another thing is DLSS and ray tracing. Yes, this is a well talked about topic. DLSS, there's FSR, but it's not as good. I even noticed DLSS isn't that good. I've actually found that XeSS is the best personally. In Forza Horizon 5, they have all of them, and I was able to look. I switched back and forth between them over and over again, and I found that I like XeSS the best. So, maybe I'll switch to Intel at some point, but but FSR is definitely the worst. Especially, I don't like mentioning Fortnite, but Fortnite, when you are anything that's touching the water, just the edge of the bus against the water, it's so blurry on the edge. It just looks so bad. And as I mentioned, NVIDIA has CUDA cores, which is very beneficial for their editors and Blender and stuff like that. I mean, AMD is still pretty good. They're newer generation GPUs. So if you are considering, I would definitely, and you're looking to do some more advanced things than just gaming, consider the newer gen GPUs, as their hardware is a lot more advanced than their previous generations. Now on to ray tracing. Ray tracing, it really doesn't matter. It shouldn't be the selling point of your graphics card. It is a very small part of your gaming experience, and you will most likely not notice it. The real thing you'll notice is in Unreal Engine 5, there's Lumen. Lumen is very noticeable and very, pretty. It's actually makes a difference. So in new games like, for example, Rivals, it is Unreal Engine 5, and you will notice it. It looks substantially better, but it also still takes a huge performance hit because it is ray tracing. So ray tracing on this 7000 series GPU is pretty good. Supposedly, the 7000, the newest generation AMD GPUs, are in line with the 3000 series NVIDIA GPUs ray tracing. So keep that in mind. So if you're comparing a 3080 and a 7800 XT, the 7800 XT will match the 3080 more or less in ray tracing performance. Along with that newer generation chip and stuff, it's gonna make a good impact on performance uplift. Now, if you're looking for a 40 series, obviously that's gonna have the best ray tracing performance. But a 7900 XTX, top of the line, $800 graphics card now, gets the amount of FPS a 4070 Super has at max ray tracing. So it's not bad. It's not bad by any means, but it is substantially less. Since NVIDIA invented ray tracing, it's not really AMD's fault that it sucks, supposedly. But it doesn't suck. That's the funny thing about it. So if you're just looking for ray tracing, go NVIDIA. They invented it. They have invested the most time into it and research and drivers and stuff into it. But if you would like to turn it on once in a while, would like to play Unreal Engine 5, and want that VRAM, which is helpful for ray tracing, by the way, then AMD is a good option for you. Some extra things are that there are new Intel GPUs that just launched. The reviews just came out today, on the day I'm filming this. There's the Arc B580, and then in a month is the B570, and they're supposedly really good value. So if you're looking at the lower mid-range end, around 60 series class, then definitely consider those. The B580 actually, I looked and it was sold out already, so have fun with that. But the B570 is coming in a month, and it's a little bit lower range. It has 10 gigabytes instead of 12 gigabytes, and a little less cores and stuff, but still probably just as good. And they've got all their new things. They're basically DLSS and ray tracing and frame generation, and it's supposedly pretty good. There's also the 50 series coming soon, be announced in January, probably at Computex or CES. Is it CES? I'm pretty sure it's CES. And then 8000 series is rumored to be coming soon, which makes sense because both AMD and NVIDIA released their last newest series GPUs in 2022, and for them to all be releasing around this time 2 years later makes sense. If I missed anything, if I maybe looked over something that you would consider to be a really good selling point or a really not so good selling point with AMD, make sure to comment it down below. I greatly appreciate the comments. I might even pin yours if it's good enough, and it might be very appreciated among the community. Just let me know if there's anything I missed, and if you have AMD, let me know. And if you have NVIDIA and are looking at AMD, or even if you have Intel and you're looking at AMD, which is pretty surprising because Intel's so new. Yeah, let me know. Are you considering the switch, and are you going to proceed with it? That's pretty much it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to consider subscribing to get me to 1,000 subscribers. That's pretty much it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Peace out.